Welcome back to Autonomous Parts Adventures, and this video is all about how I improved my real-world performance of these Victron battery chargers by 25%. So this whole video is based off two little lines in the Victron manual for their Orion battery chargers not many people know about or not many people realise. Most people believe that these units are 30 amp chargers, which is correct, but that's 30 amp is very specific. As if you look at the manual, it actually says continuous output for that 30 amp or the 360 watt is actually at 40 degrees. However, they will do a continuous output at 25 degrees of 430 watt. A lot of people are familiar with these items is that they are prone to overheating. And quite often, when I said I improved my performance by 25%, I said my real world performance, because I will often see the 30 amp for the first few minutes, and after an hour of driving, these usually stabilize at around 25 amps output, which is about 300-ish watts. And you'll find a lot of people have similar, depending on how cooled their cabinets are or where they're mounted, especially because a lot of people mount them incorrectly or with no clearance at the top, that they often see anywhere between 28, 25, and even some people I know have seen 18s of the units getting really hot. But that goes in the opposite direction. Whilst if the unit gets warmer and gets above 40 degrees, then it starts a thermal throttle to protect itself and decrease the output. Below 40 degrees, it increases its output. It increases its output far past 30 amp. So I'm going to test that. As you can see, I have a cooling system set up and it's been working fantastically. I've got, at the minute, some 12 volt blower fans, and I've got custom 3D printed ducting which goes directly into the fins at the back. And that means for me, at the end of an hour's worth of driving, I am still getting collectively a 64 amp or 65 amp output. However, this video is going to show the testing process of running the cooler against and looking at the outputs of the units, whilst keeping one of the cooling off. So one is just stock and the passive cooling on just the heat fins, and one is going to be my active cooling using the fans and ducting, and look at the performance next to each other using thermal imaging and amp clamps and so on. So a bit of an explanation on what I've got going on here. I've got two 120mm blower fans and they're 1 amp each. However, that's off the input side of the chargers, so that doesn't take away from charging output. And then I've got a setup at the minute where I've got a button on a switch on my dashboard. If I have the switch in one direction, only one of these units come on, maybe it's summertime use, and if I have the switch in two directions, both units are on, which is most of my wintertime use. But that's also set up in a way that if only one of them's on, only one of the fans run, which is why there are relays here. So that's what's going on here. But I'm just going to go back to before this was installed and see the process of me putting this in, and some of the early testing on how the airflow works and so on, and then we'll get into the actual thermal testing of the units later.
And I forgot to press record, but these are all screwed down now.
So just run a little bench test with these running. As you can hear, a little bit noisy, although they do sound a bit noisier on the video than they do in person. So I'm going to get some custom ducting just to spread it out, but they actually do quite a good job at spreading it out already. Whilst it is noisy, it's going to be in the cupboard at the back of the van, and they're only going to be turned on whilst I'm driving, and I'm going to use an ignition live. So the fact that they're noisy is kind of irrelevant because I'm going to be driving anyway. Because I always enjoy playing with the thermal camera, you can see the actual airflow coming out. Right, as I think it would be a good demo to just see the cooling effects, I'm going to point a heat gun into one of them to pump hot air, and you'll be able to see the heating effects. It's been a little while and almost everything is now wired up. So I think all that's left to do is turn the engine on and see what happens. We're going to turn it on first just to make sure that this system works, and then turn it off and then get ready to actually properly test it. So I've just switched to the other camera because I need the phone to be able to see the chargers. So at the minute, they're both powered, they're both off. is able to import voltage lockout and charge detection. Cool, so I'm going to start the engine and hopefully they will do nothing. So the engine's running. I plug in this, hopefully it should, this one should turn on. Right, let's put in the other one and see if this will work then. Output also bulk charging. So they're currently both bulk charging, bringing in 55 amps. 55 amps, probably because all the lights are on in the van as well. So currently charging at 69 amps because the units haven't heated up yet. 68.2 amps. This is only showing 60 because the fridge I think I can hear is currently got on, and there'll be a few other things as well. So let's go put the amp clamp on the alternator feed and see what that's bringing in. 76 amps. Well, nice to see on the first test that they were both up and running. And you can see, you know, how much heat they are just by a few minutes of running up to 20 degrees. So for the first test I'm going to do a control along with a fan with no ducting, so we can actually have two units next to each other to see sort of the contrast and difference. So this is the setup I'm going to be using. I'm going to have my main phone, which is what I film on usually, with the FLIR camera running a video, looking at the door with the door open, and I'm going to disconnect the right hand fan. So this unit will not be cooled, it will be stock, and this unit will have the air blowing through it, and we should be able to, like, first off the bat, just see what sort of contrast and difference there is, like if the active cooling actually has any effects on the units, and then we'll look at performance later on. What you are going to see in the video is you will see all of these cables light up, they're going to become warm. When looking at thermal, you need to remember that the way this is currently set up is just because it's white doesn't mean it's hot. The white areas just mean it's the hottest in the scene at the time. So at the minute in the top left corner, which is the reflection of the BMV, that's bright white, which you would imply looks like scalding, but actually it's only a few degrees warmer than the midpoint and the lowest point. So the units and the cabling will become warm, it will change colour because any current running through them will heat them up. Same for the fans. The fan motors in the middle will probably be the hottest point in the scene, hopefully, as they do heat up. But with air going through the left fan and not the right fan, hopefully we'll see if there are any differences actually in the cooling of the unit, and then from there we'll be able to see if there are any charging differences. So if one of them starts a thermal throttle, or one of them we start getting the same or higher than 30 amp output. So pretty much ready to go, just need to go start the engine. Cooling fans are hooked up to the ignition, so when the keys are in ignition, the keys turn, the cooling fans start, or in this case only one of them will start because we've got one turned off, and then when I turn the engine on, then the battery chargers we should figure out they're needing to turn on. Units will start heating up now. So at least you can see the heat coming off the one of the units. Right, we're just going to do our first little move and have a look at the top of the units from different views. Realised I hadn't been recording. We're currently 10 minutes in, and the BDB on the right hand side, which is no cooling, is currently 41 degrees, and the one on the left is still 25 degrees. Right, currently at the 13-minute mark. Clearly the heater on the right is a lot hotter. Let's see if it's actually starting to affect the amps out. So the cooled heater is currently outputting 32.3 amp, and the other heater, I'm going to have to put the phone down in a second. It's currently doing 31, so definitely starting to dial itself back. So let's go with the ampy clampy again. So, currently at the 22-minute mark, so the cooled unit is outputting 31.8 amp, and the uncooled unit is now putting out 29.3. Minute mark, 32.6 amp, 29.3. So currently at about the 29 minute mark for the half-an-hour test. Still in bulk, which is good, just to make sure that they're both outputting the absolute maximum. Marvellous. Well, I think this shows the success of cooling. The left unit has the cooling on at the minute is about 29 degrees, whilst the right-hand unit has no cooling, is up to 54. But actual performance-wise, this one, when I just checked a minute ago, we're still outputting about 32 amp. 32.9 amp. This one was now dropping down and throttling itself, and was at 29. So a couple amps more out of this one. Leave the test going a bit longer. So currently at the 30-minute mark. Let's just have a look. So this unit is outputting 32.7, and the uncooled unit 29 now. So we're still getting 3 extra amps out of this one. Right, 30 minutes in, and this one is still performing better. It's outputting about 3 amps more, 4 amps more than the uncooled one. So that is a 10% to 15% efficiency increase. Just so people can see, cable end for the starter battery where the cables are mounted. Hottest point is only 20 degrees. Right, half an hour done, so I'm going to go shut them down now and just get the final amp readings off them before I do so. So, cooled unit 32.4, 28.4. If you do like this sort of stuff, feel free to give my channel a subscribe. It really helps me out. And there's plenty of other videos of me doing things like how I installed 2 of these battery chargers and lots of other stuff. But this sort of test is also doing a half-an-hour test idling, which is sort of the worst case scenario. He's already running these chargers as the alternator is only working at idle revolution. So let's just have a quick look at the alternator temperatures. So worst possible scenario is just sitting there. My alternator is currently reading 73 degrees. So my friend sent over the 3D printed ducting to give a test. It's effectively just the outflow of the fan to the width of the heatsink, and can be screwed down, and just some internal dividers to help push the airflow. At the minute, most of the airflow comes out and goes sort of this way like this. Hopefully this will just divert some of the air that way. How do I get this in without having to undo all my wiring? because you're not going to be able to see the ducting because it's going to be underneath the wire loom, I'll just show you how it's going to clip. It's going to clip on because the heatsink's the same way. It'll just be on the underside. So there's some little alignment tabs. There you go, and it will just fit on the heatsink like that, blowing the hot air. Well, it'll be the other way up, but blowing the hot air through and just diverting it across nicely. So let's get it installed on this one, and we'll keep this one as the control. So just thought I'd give you an example of the ducting and why we're going to use the ducting. So you can see so just at the minute these two are missed. Whilst offsetting the fans might have helped that, then again it might have been that these ones were missed. So let's put the ducting in. So ducting installed. The reason I showed you it before, and you just really can't see it when it's all tucked in there. So we're cooled down back to the same temp level. I'm going to put the ducting on the left one, and the right one just has the unducted fan, but both fans will be on this time. So let's turn the engine on and see how it performs. So left one is ducted, right one is unducted. And you can definitely see that the left one is more of an even cooling, whilst the right hand one you can see is got that hot spot where the two fins are missing cooling. Right, 17-minute mark. 32.8. 32.8. So they're still pretty neck and neck on the cooling, what without ducting and with ducting. Right, currently at the 23-minute mark. 32.33, 32.7, 32.4. I think I'm generally going to say that they are still the same, whilst I'm getting maybe 0.2 difference in them. If you actually squeeze the clamp, you apparently increase it, so I think that's down to tool measuring issues. 32.2, 32.4. It's still charged at 64 amp. Right, that is the 30-minute mark. So 34 in the middle of that unit, and 31 in the middle of 32 in the middle of that unit. You can see that there is a bit of it's colder on the left hand side where there's more airflow. This one is a pretty even distribution of air, with probably slightly warmer in the middle. Presumably that's where the majority of the electrics are. Right, time to slot the other ducting in. There we go. Seated, and get the heater bits back on. So a test of an 18-minute drive. Whilst I've proposed just letting it idle to see how it's working. The exhaust is currently pumping out 18 degrees. Let's open up the cabinet and see how everything's running. So you can see the extractor fan over there has been cooling down. Well, happy with that from an actual real-world driving test. So, that's pretty much going to conclude this video. My final thoughts would be, any form of cooling on these units makes a massive difference. In my case, I had a 25% increase, and that 25% increase is going off my real-world actual output of these units in real-world use, not the 30 amp Victron list. So I would get about 300 watt after an hour or so of driving, and now I'm getting about 400 or 410 watt after an hour of driving. So that's the math of why I've got a real world 25% increase. Obviously, if you do use different fans, if you do it, or what your unit's throttled to in the first place is going to change that, but that's my efficiency increase. Regardless, any form of cooling, you will get better performance, or direct cooling like that. I would say that there wasn't, whilst not a massive difference between the ducted and unducted test, but that was only a half an hour test. Potentially in the longer term there may be a bigger difference, but only marginal. However, the heating or the cooling was actually far more equal across the device than the ducted one. You could see on the unducted that the rightmost fins were mist and getting a lot hotter, so maybe after an hour or two of driving that would have a smaller effect. Whilst I've gone for the sort of noisy, overpowered version, I do think even a smaller, quieter fan would get some improvements on your output and your efficiency. So my friend Ian from Together to Go, he's the one who printed those ductings for me, and he's the one who did all the CAD work, and we sort of bounced around a few ideas and made those. We were looking at the idea of making an actual viable commercial product. Do you think anyone would, or would you be interested in, if you could just purchase at the right price a kit which came with the fan and the brackets, and we'll look at the ducting to have cable management ways in it. You can see I built all those cable ways because the ducting's in the way of the irons normally. The ducting we would be looking at producing would have places where you can zip tie and clip and run all the cables down neatly. Is that something you think you'd be interested in? Be able to just buy an active cooling kit that you can just clip to the bottom and screw down on the unit and get better performance. Additionally, the version I'm using is the more power version. We would also be sort of looking at making a more streamlined, minimal version, which will probably have a 120mm fan set behind the unit, which will be a lot quieter. Probably won't get the same amount of performance out of it, but to be a lot quieter and have the units probably a lot happier and not running at their normal output. Yeah, we're sort of looking at that, making a commercial product. Yes, you could do this easily yourself, but a lot of people who are watching this channel might be sort of the more DIYers and happy to do it themselves. Do you think there's an option for just a kit you could purchase where you could get all the ducting and the things sent to you and you can just install it and don't have to think about mounting and making it? If you think that's a viable idea, yeah, post down below, because we are interested. We are looking at making that potentially something that we could sell. I hope you found that helpful. I found it a lot of fun to do. It means I get to play with the thermal camera, and well, it's made a big difference the amount of power I get from these units for only a few pounds worth of upgrades. So if you like this sort of content, feel free to subscribe. Leave me a comment if you've liked it as well. If you want to buy any of these units, I'll probably put links to different places in the description, and I'll probably get a few quid off on affiliate links if you pay for those. And yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers, bye.